Well, after a wild weekend of racing, we have plenty to discuss this week as Carson Hocevar nearly got his first career win, only to come up short yet again. Junior Motorsports dominates another Xfinity race, which led to Josh Berry's second win on the season. And Endurance reigns supreme yet again in the Coca-Cola 600. So let's dive right into it on this episode of 3 Wide. So starting things out on Friday night at Charlotte Motor Speedway, you had the Truck Series with Ty Majeski and Zane Smith on row 1. Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain, they were also making starts in Friday night's race. They were starting up towards the front as well. But stage 1, it was all Zane Smith as he got another stage win, which was no surprise there with the season he's had. Now, stage 2 would actually end under caution. You had Ben Rhodes get the stage win there after he stayed out on a previous caution. And as soon as they really took the green flag there, he was battling his teammate Christian Eckes when the caution flew yet again, and they were unable to get the race started back before the end of stage 2, and Ben Rhodes would get yet another stage win. But stage 3 is kind of when it all started getting interesting to watch, I should say. It was a battle between Ryan Preece and Carson Hocevar. Preece, he had led the start of stage 3, was looking to have a strong truck, but Carson Hocevar, he came and took over the race from that point and really was looking to be in the best shape he's been in to get that first career win after coming close so many times, so many second-place finishes. He had a 6-second lead with 4 laps to go, coming to 3 to go, and unfortunate caution would come out. There was a wreck between Tyler Ankrum and Jesse Little. So now Carson would go from pretty much cruising to his first career win to having to fight for it. And on the ensuing restart, you had Carson choose the inside lane instead of the outside, which was surprising because the outside line for the Truck Series, it seemed to be the preferred lane. You could really get that momentum coming off the corner and get ahead. But for some reason, Carson stuck with the bottom. And while they were going through turns 1 and 2, both Hocevar and Preece getting the most that they could out of their trucks, Hocevar, I want to say it looked like he got loose or he kind of started coming up the track, but also it looked like Preece started coming down. Either way, they would wind up making contact. Hocevar, he would get loose as they got closer and send Preece into the wall along with himself. They were both able to gather it back up and keep going and hang on to P1 and P2 running side by side. Ross Chastain, who's Hocevar's teammate, come up, trying to push Hocevar ahead, but the damage had pretty much already been done. Hocevar got loose going in between turns 3 and 4, would spin out, once again collecting Preece and sending him into the wall, and that took both of them out of contention. Hocevar had quite a bit of damage, and Preece, he just knew he was not going to be able to contend for a win. He felt like he had a tire going flat, so they decided to bring him to pit road to try and fix that and get the best finish they could out of it. And after the race, both drivers really gave, passionate, and in Hocevar's case, emotional interviews. They interviewed Carson Hocevar first. He said it was a DA move by himself. He tried too hard, and he was trying to kind of wash Preece up out of the lane just to, get him loose, get him out of shape so Hocevar could get back ahead. Said he just wound up crashing himself. So Hocevar took the blame, said it's on me. He just pushed it too hard. Whereas Ryan Preece was not happy at all. He pretty much said he wanted to focus on that final restart between him and Hocevar, and he made a comment to the younger kids out there who are coming up through the ranks or wanting to be NASCAR drivers, saying when they get to the level they're at in NASCAR, don't do that. You got to race with respect. You don't wreck the guy you're racing for your first career win. And Kurt in the booth this weekend for the Truck Series, he said he agreed with Preece, but it doesn't always work out like that where you're not going to have contact, you're not going to get wrecked. Hocevar, he owned up to it, blamed it, on himself, said he just, went in over his head. And look, Ryan Preece, he's had to scratch and claw to get where he is at this point in his career. He's bet on himself many times, and most of the time it's come out well for him. He's gotten a couple career wins in the Xfinity Series for Joe Gibbs Racing, which led to him getting a shot with JTG Daughtry Racing in the Cup Series. Ultimately, that opportunity kind of dried out, and now he's kind of trying to, not really reinvent himself, but reinvigorate his career and build himself up. He's got a developmental deal with Stewart-Haas Racing right now. He looks to be a good, in a good position to get a top ride in the Xfinity or even the Cup Series possibly. But Preece is one of those, kind of an old school guy. He doesn't have the big sponsors attached to him that just fund his career. He's had to fight for where he is. So obviously he's not going to be happy. He's pretty much living. He's got 2 races left, I believe he said. And he even made the comment that if he doesn't do good, he doesn't get paid. So it's probably more personal for Preece just because of that in itself. Hocevar, it wasn't anything dirty or trying to necessarily wreck Preece, take him out. He's a young driver. A lot of people are pretty high on Hocevar. They know this first win is coming. It's just a matter of when. And the whole time I was watching that last run where he had such a big lead, I was hoping the caution wouldn't come out just so he could break through, get that first win, get that pressure off his shoulders, and then you can really see what he's got. Both drivers, they got a bright future, I think, in NASCAR as a whole. I don't know which series, but they do have a bright future. Don't think this will really hurt either one of them. Obviously, just 2 drivers going for it all. They need the wins. Unfortunately, it just did not work out for either one of them. So now we have the Xfinity Series on Saturday, and really the race should have just been called the Junior Motorsports 300 because it was all JRM all day. You had Sam Mayer, Justin Allgaier start on front row for Junior Motorsports, and as a whole, they led 190 of 200 laps. The only other driver to lead was Ryan Preece. He led for 10 laps total. They had 4 cars in the top 10 of Stage 1, all 4 of their drivers. Josh Berry got the stage win in that one. 3 of their drivers, they ended at Stage 2 in the top 10, and that stage was won by Justin Allgaier. So they were dominant all day long, which is really no surprise. Besides Joe Gibbs Racing, they've probably been the most dominant team. You got Allgaier's gotten a win. Gregson's gotten multiple wins. Josh Berry, who won Saturday, he now has multiple wins on the season. Sam Mayer's knocking on the door to get a win this year. It's just right now Junior Motorsports League. The top 10 finishing order would be Josh Berry got the win, 17 seconds over Ty Gibbs, who finished second. Sam Mayer finished third, followed by Noah Gragson in fourth. Ryan Preece would finish in fifth, followed by Daniel Hemrick in sixth. Justin Allgaier would finish in seventh to round out a top 10 for all 4 Junior Motorsports drivers. Sheldon Creed, he would finish 8th. Trevor Bayne 9th, and Myatt Snyder would finish in 10th. And when the checkered flag fell, there was only 6 cars on the lead lap. So, looking and hearing at the stats, 17-second win, 6 cars on the lead lap, you would think it wasn't that entertaining of a race, but it was. There was good racing going on all over the place. Ryan Preece up there in a BJ McLeod car, really mixing it up with some of the big names and big teams. Ty Gibbs overcoming. He wasn't having the race of his career and able to finish in second. There was a lot going on. Trevor Bayne got up there and was having another good run. And really, for some of these drivers, they were in big need of a solid top 10 day. Drivers like Sheldon Creed, who is 59 points out of the playoffs right now. Mike Snyder, he gets his 3rd top 10 on the season. Daniel Hemrick got a top 10. So it was probably the best day for Daniel Hemrick. He gained 35 points on the gap between him and the playoff cutoff spot, so now he is plus 75 to that. And right now, Ryan Sieg, he's starting to slip back a little bit, which is kind of normal for him. He starts out good. He has some good runs to get himself quite a few points, pad his way, into the playoffs. But it seems like as the season goes on, him being a smaller team, self-owned team, they just, kind of start falling back a little bit. That, kind of no fault of their own. They're just doing the best they can. So if Sheldon Creed, if he can start knocking off these top 10s, start getting some stage points, he can really start eating into that points difference and get a good shot at getting a playoff spot for points. And you had another top 10 for Trevor Bayne in his races for Joe Gibbs Racing. As I said, he got as high as second in the race. And he's had 4 races this year with them, and 3 of them have been top 10s, 2 of them top 5s. So if he's looking to impress somebody and get a full-time shot, he's definitely doing the right things. It might take a race win to really open some eyes. I'm not sure, but definitely not a whole lot to complain about for his few starts he's gotten. And really, it was a tough day for Riley Herbst. He was running in the top 10. He got into the wall and wound up, losing a tire going into turns 3. And for Riley, it's that's been the one dark spot in his season. Saturday, he's been consistent this year. He may not be up there, battling for the win right now, but he is getting more consistent in his finishes. He's got 9 top 10s in 13 races. His average finish, I believe, is right now in the 12th, somewhere in that range, whereas his previous best was 18th, 19th, somewhere in there. So he's got more consistent, which he needs if he wants to get to where he's a consistent race contender. The wins will come if he can keep that up. So, while it may have been a tough day for him, he's definitely got a lot to still be proud of on his season so far, enough to keep his head up and keep going. And now, they go the Xfinity Series. They're getting ready to go to a track they haven't been to, a road course in Portland. So, anything can happen this next week. It's going to be interesting to see who can step up and get that first win at this new track. So now we had the longest race of the season, the Coca-Cola 600 on Sunday night. And growing up, I loved watching this race just because you would see so many comers and goers. It would start out in the daytime, and the drivers who were running up front, leading a lot, contending for the lead at the beginning of the races. As the race went on and the sun began to fall, the track started cooling off, you would see new drivers start working their way to the front, the teams who had done the best at preparing their cars for the long runs. Whereas in recent years, it hasn't necessarily been like that. We've had more dominant, from start to finish runs. You look at drivers like Kyle Larson, Martin Truex Jr. So it was going to be interesting to see with this next-gen car if that would change things up, if that it would bring back that endurance run, drivers just trying to keep their car in one piece, parts in one piece, and have a solid night all night long. And we got that and then some with this race. And it seemed like, whoever was winning the stages, it was kind of like the Madden curse. Drivers, they were, dropping left and right. The stage winners were. You had Chase Elliott, who won stage 1. He would end up, not finishing the race due to the damaged vehicle policy. He had a broken toe link after he made contact with the wall and spun out coming out of turn 4. And his team, they were working real hard just trying to replace that part. Ultimately would not be able to get it done in time, so his race would be over early. Stage 2 winner, Daniel Suarez, looked to be the fastest car, all night. He had several slow stops, something to put him back in the field, but he would always come flying by everyone. He would restart somewhere in the top 15, and before you knew it, he was running 3rd or 4th. So to me, I looked at Suarez. I thought he was going to be the guy to beat all night. He just seemed that strong. Unfortunately, he would also spin coming out of turn 4 after coming up in front of Chase Briscoe. I believe his spotter said he was clear, but you had Daniel also say, in his interview after getting out of the care center, that his car was tight. He had to chase it up the hill a little bit. Either way, he, would come up in front of Briscoe, get spun out, and got quite a bit of damage as he got sent back across the field in the tri-oval. Chris Buescher would be involved in that wreck and really got the worst of it as his tire would break off and dig down in that turf and would send him flipping. And, that was another shame for Buescher because he had a good, solid top 10 car at least. He was probably the stronger of the 2 RFK cars. Fortunately, was able to get out, and walk off in his own power after they had to flip the car back over as it landed on its roof. He did say that it was a pretty hard hit. He's flipped a few times before in his career and definitely seemed like that one hurt him the worst. But I'm sure he's feeling that today. But fortunately, was able to get out of the car and, again, attest to this new next-gen car, how safe it is. Your Stage 3 winner, Ross Chastain, he was consistent all night. I would say he was, him and Suarez both had the best cars, and it seemed like one of these Trackhouse cars were going to go to victory lane. Unfortunately, in the final stretch of the race, he would, lose touch with the leaders. He got passed by Larson and Briscoe, falling back to third. But then you had the incident with Chase Briscoe trying to pass Kyle Larson, and Briscoe, he had been working on him, for lap after lap after lap there at the end, and was really setting up for an exciting finish. But before we get to that, going back to Chastain would get another shot at it after that caution until coming out of turn 4 on the first overtime attempt. He was caught in a huge wreck. Again, coming out of turn 4, it seemed to be the problem spot for all these drivers. He got quite a bit of nose damage. However, he decided to stay out and restart on the front row. And I was thinking, this was going to lead to another overtime restart, because there was no way either he was going to come out of that corner, out of turn 2 in one piece, if he didn't get spun out before. But he was able to keep it going, keep it straight. He did fall back quite a bit. He would end up finishing 15th. So it was, a tough day for the 3 stage winners. And going back to the Briscoe versus Larson, he had built up a pretty nice lead. Briscoe, he had worked to track him back down, and you had Larson right up against the wall. Briscoe probably about a half a lane from him, just trying to get clean air on the nose. And these are 2 dirt track drivers, 2 of the best. And it was so much fun to just sit there and watch them going, man to man, just racing hard. Briscoe trying to get whatever he could to get around it. He attempted a couple, or at least one main slide job. He could have, cut it in front of Larson, but it was going to be close. Briscoe ultimately decided, that's probably not for the best. Let's just try to keep the momentum so I can still have a shot at him. Going into turns 1 and 2, he made one more shot trying to get underneath Larson to really just come out of the corner with as much momentum as he could and try to stay side by side with him to set up another pass. Unfortunately, Briscoe just overdrove it, spun out. Fortunate it didn't collect Larson included in this one, but that would end, it would seem to end Briscoe's chance at a win. But that would set up this overtime restart where you had drivers like Larson, Chastain. They would decide to take 2 tires, whereas the drivers behind them like Denny Hamlin, Austin Dillon, I believe Kevin Harvick may have also taken 4 tires, but I know Austin and Denny at least did take 4 tires. And it showed a huge difference what those 4 tires could do, because on that restart, Austin Dillon came out of nowhere from the outside of the third row. And by the time they're going into turns 3 and 4, he is right there at Larson to get by him for the lead. But Denny was right there with him as well. And Denny would ultimately get up under Austin Dillon, who was beside Larson. There was also a car to the outside, and coming off of, turn 4 wide, it's just not a good combination. It would send Austin up across the track in front of everyone, cause a huge wreck, and that would end Austin's night. And he looked to be in the best spot for a win, get his second career Coke 600, win. Unfortunately, after that wreck, he would finish 22nd. And now, as far as the playoffs look, he is 22 points back to his teammate Tyler Reddick for that final playoff spot on points. And he even said in his interview post-race that, looking at the point situation, he felt like this was his chance to go for it, get that win and lock himself in, which, I applaud. I love seeing the drivers that know, hey, this is my shot, I got to go for it. Because sometimes drivers may, back out of it or just not feel 100% comfortable to go the way Austin did. But, bravo to Austin for giving it a shot. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him, but, he still has a chance to get some points if he can get some more consistent runs. And right now, looking at the playoffs, you got Eric Almirola, who is 8 back to Reddick. Eric Jones is 29. Suarez is 49 points back as well. And you have 5 spots left for points. And really, it's going to get tight here as this season continues on, especially if we keep getting these new winners, because you look at Daniel Suarez, if he can put it together, he can win a race. Austin Dillon, I feel the same for him. Eric Jones, I think he could, get a race win, as well as Tyler Reddick, who's above the cut line right now. But if any of those guys under the cut line get a win, it's really going to throw a big kink for these drivers, hoping to get in on points. The positions are just going to get more and more narrow in the points. So there's still a chance we could have 16 winners, this season, which to me is the biggest thing to watch week in and week out. But as I said, with that, going back to that big overtime wreck, that would set up another overtime restart, and it would be teammates at Joe Gibbs Racing, Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch, battling for the race win, and they were racing side by side, pretty much till the white flag, and until Kyle got loose up under Denny, trying to gather it up, ultimately gave Denny the win, and he would get his second win on the year. And really, Toyota, they seem to have kind of hit their stride. They're starting to get a little bit more consistent. You're starting to see a little bit more speed out of them. So Denny gets his second win of the year. Kyle Busch finishes second, followed by Kevin Harvick in third, Chase Briscoe in fourth, Christopher Bell in fifth. Tyler Reddick, he was able to come back with a sixth-place finish, followed by Ricky Stenhouse in seventh. Michael McDowell would finish in eighth, and Kyle Larson in ninth, and Alex Bowman would round out the top 10. And you also had, with all these wrecks, there was only 20 cars running at the end. So some of these guys that were able to survive all the cautions, all the wrecks, they were able to get some solid finishes that they've been looking for all season. Like Harrison Burton, he was able to get his best career finish in 11th. So not too bad for him in his first Coke 600. B.J. McLeod, he tied his best finish of the season with a 19th place finish. So that's good for a small team like that. They've struggled to make a couple races. To come away with a 19th place finish in this big of a race is big for that team. And looking at this race as a whole, my takeaways has to be, the first thing is the All-Star race needs to go back to Charlotte, at least, for the time being. This shows to me how big a problem Texas Motor Speedway really is. You look at all the races at these cookie cutter mile and a half tracks so far this season. You look at Vegas, you look at Kansas, now Charlotte, Auto Club Speedway, Atlanta. It's not the car that's the problem at that track. It's the track itself. Texas really needs to go back to the drawing board and do something about that track. They really, I think, messed it up when they reconfigured it and changed up turns 1 and 2. So, with that being said, to me, there's no reason to go back to Texas next year, at least for an all-star race. You put this car on this track for an all-star race, you could have one heck of a show. And, Texas had sent out a tweet. I can't remember if it was before the race or during the race, but announcing the date that next year that they will get the All-Star race. And next thing you know, that tweet was deleted. I don't know if it was because of the overwhelming negative reaction to it in the comments, or if NASCAR got a hold of somebody and said, hey, y'all need to take that down. We're wanting to wait on any announcements, until we release the whole schedule. Or NASCAR could be, looking at changing the event venue, but what I think is most likely is NASCAR's just wanting to hold off on that announcement until they get this whole schedule put together for next season. And the Coke 600, it finally goes back to being an endurance race. You had tires failing, parts breaking, drivers spinning out. It was true man versus machine for 600 miles. Who was going to be able to just outlast the field in this race? You had Denny Hamlin, who really wasn't much of a factor by any means for most of the race, able to survive and get that win, which was huge for him. And this race, it had the most lead changes since 2011 when Kevin Harvick won, and the most cautions since the 2005 Coke 600 when Jimmy Johnson just edged Bobby Labonte at the start-finish line, and is really looked at by fans as, the previous best Coke 600. And that race in 2005, you look at the stats from it was very similar to this year's race. A lot of single car spins, drivers struggling with their cars, tires failing. You had a couple of multi-car crashes. It was very similar, which is probably why it was before this season, this year's running the best by the fans. And one thing I noticed in this race that kind of stood out to me was the damaged vehicle policy. And, I think this thing needs work done on it. NASCAR's went to this damaged vehicle policy. I forgot, if it was 2 or 3 years ago, I believe. I could be wrong. But basically, it was put in place to keep cars that really had no business on the track after a wreck from going out there. You would have cars used to, with no front fenders, no rear fenders, or, redone the doors and the numbers are taped on, all sorts of things. And the cars go out there and are barely able to keep up minimum speed. NASCAR did this to avoid all that, to keep competitive cars on the track, per se. And the reason I think this needs work is because I think a couple drivers got hosed on it this week. To me, the most notable one was Bubba Wallace, who got a DNF because of the damaged vehicle policy after getting caught up in a multi-car accident in turns 1 and 2 with Ryan Blaney and several others. Bubba, he spun out, didn't really make contact with anyone, didn't hit the wall. There was no just big damage on the car. They came to pit road, and his crew chief decided to put older tires on it. There was only a couple laps going to be left in the stage by the time they took the green. So simply just, to get Bubba to the end of the stage so they can regroup, get their car, some fresh tires, and get back into a strong run. Because Bubba had a strong car. He really did. I think he would have been, if he could have survived all the cautions, he could have been up there for a solid top 10, possible top 5 day, which would have been huge for them. However, with the older tires and Bubba just trying to take it easy to get to the end, he did not meet the minimum speed, which is one of the rules with this damaged vehicle policy, where if you get your car fixed within the certain amount of time you're given and get back on the track, you still have to meet minimum speed by the end of the damage clock. So to me, that wasn't a good move. How am I trying to say this? I understand where Bubba's crew chief and team made this decision. Obviously, I think it falls on them to know the rule. They should have known they had to meet minimum speed, but also you can't blame them for just trying to survive. I mean, there were drivers just losing control and spinning out all by their own, or like in this accident, one driver spins in the middle of the field and collects a lot of people. So I just think NASCAR should go back and look. If a car has hardly any damage, such as Bubba, and it's going to meet minimum speed, I don't know why you can't maybe add a little extra time to the clock, or make, minimum requirements for, getting on the damaged vehicle policy. I'm not sure. But for Bubba, that ruined a good run that he could have had, and was in bad need to get it. Another driver who I feel like kind of got hosed by was Chase Elliott. With his spin, as I mentioned earlier, he broke the toe link and could not get it replaced in time. His crew was working on it. They were trying to grind that thing to get that broken toe link fixed. Again, if they were able to get that part repaired, I don't see why Chase wouldn't have met minimum speed if he'd have been able to make it on the track. But with Chase's spin, it was a single car spin. It was a mechanical part breaking. I don't see why, again, you can't add a little extra time, or possibly even let him go to the garage and repair this part and come back on the track, because there wasn't enough damage there, I think, that would have prevented him to meet minimum speed. So I know it's probably not going to happen. This is something I think NASCAR is got a pretty strong feeling and opinion on, but unfortunately, I just think it got a couple drivers from getting some solid finishes, Bubba especially. I think Chase, he would have been down multiple laps, but with as many wrecks as we had, as many drivers that were out of the race, he still could have had a decent finish on the day with taking waiver rounds and even, like, as I said, with drivers out of the race. So, but all in all, we can't complain about the race as a whole. It was a very entertaining, very good race. So, again, this next-gen car continues to impress, and take it race by race, but it's looking pretty good for right now. So before we get into previewing next weekend's races, we're going to be putting the spotlight on some drivers who were able to overcome any adversities they had throughout the race, or were able to snap a rough streak of races and able to get a solid finish, or drivers who were not maybe in the best equipment, but were able to make the most of it, get all they could out of their equipment, and finish strong. For the Truck Series, my spotlight driver this week is Tanner Gray, who is right now in a pretty good battle for a playoff spot on points. He gets his first top 10 since Atlanta in March. And Tanner, he's had a lot of speed this year. Started out the season strong, just unfortunately hasn't been able to keep the consistency going. Been caught up in a lot of wrecks, some not of his own making. But he was able to get this top 10, and the big thing was he gained 10 points on Matt Crafton on the cut line for the playoff spot, for the final playoff spot. He went from 35 points back to 25, which is huge. You know, anytime you can gain that much on somebody for a playoff spot is a good day. If he can, get some stage points, keep this, solid finishes, nothing major, just keep yourself ahead or at least within view of Matt Crafton on the finishing board, then he will have a good shot to get that playoff spot. And jumping over to the Xfinity Series, my spotlight driver is Ryan Preece, who got a top 5 for BJ McLeod Motorsports, and this is their third top 5 overall as a team, and their first since the Circuit of the Americas race with Kevin Harvick last year. So big race for them to get this top 5 on an oval. And for Ryan Preece, it's his first top 5 since 2019 when he last was racing in the Xfinity Series. And he was doing some part-time work for Junior Motorsports. This weekend at Charlotte, he was doing triple duty, races across the board. He had nearly got the win Friday night in the truck race, got the solid top 5 finish on Saturday. And while his cup race obviously didn't go for the way he wanted it, still has a lot to be proud of. Able to get a top 5 for a team like BJ McLeod is a good day, is a big day for him. Now, for the Cup Series, I had a few names, that I could go over, and really I feel like anybody who crossed the finish line in this race should be a spotlight driver. But I had to pick one, but I do have a couple honorable mentions. My first one is Tyler Reddick, who comes back after getting a flat tire and losing a lap. He comes back to finish in the top 10. My other spotlight driver, or honorable mention driver, is Ty Dillon, who didn't have the strongest race from start to finish. Most of the race he was in that 20th to 30th position range, but he was able to keep his car clean, avoid all these major wrecks, and just keep picking them off until finally he was able to cross the start-finish line in 13th place. So a solid day for him. And like I said, the biggest thing was keeping that car clean, not involved in any incidents. So that's, he's one of the very few in that race that was able to do it. But the same cannot be said for who is my spotlight driver, and that is Kyle Larson, who went through just about everything a driver could Sunday, and it's a wonder he even finished the race, much less in the top 10. He went through things that he hit the wall, spun out right after it. He had 3 pit road penalties. His car caught on fire at one point. He had that battle with Chase Briscoe where, if Chase had been a little bit further up on him and spun out then, it would have probably taken Kyle out of the race. However, he was able to continue on, and after all was said and done, finish in 9th place. So for Kyle Larson to go through all those things and all that, adversity to get a good top 10 finish and nearly win the thing if it had stayed green, he has got to be the biggest spotlight driver so far this season. So a good run for each driver that I mentioned. And now we look ahead to this weekend, which will be a lot of firsts. You have the Cup Series and Xfinity Series, making debuts at a couple tracks that they haven't raced at before. The Xfinity Series, they're going to Portland International Raceway, which is just shy of a 2-mile road course. It's going to be interesting to see, who can come ahead with that first win there. I think obviously A.J. Allmendinger, with the way he can race on road courses, is going to be the favorite and the guy to watch. But who knows? Anybody could come up and surprise there. The Truck Series and Cup Series, they are headed to Gateway in St. Louis, which I believe is called Worldwide Technology Raceway, I believe. I could be wrong. But either way, it is the Cup Series first race there. And to me, kind of the dark horse or driver to watch would be Justin Haley, who's probably got the most laps at that track over anyone in recent memory that I know of. He won a race in the Truck Series, and he had 2 top 10s and 3 starts when he was in the Truck Series. So he at least is probably currently the guy with the best, most recent experience at this track. On the truck side, they're also going to be at Gateway. They've been there several times. And Sheldon Creed, he has been the dominant driver there. He's won the last 2 races. Obviously, he will be across the country in Portland. So somebody else is going to have to step up and get the win there. Very well could be, I feel like Carson Hocevar is a threat to win week in, week out. It's just a matter of him breaking through that glass ceiling and getting it. Also, drivers like Ben Rhodes and Christian Eckes, I think, will also be 2 drivers to keep an eye on and see who can come away with the win there. But promises to be an exciting race, and I'm looking forward to seeing the two of the top series at these new tracks, seeing how the drivers are able to adapt to them and compete on them. So a lot of interesting things to watch for this weekend. And that'll wrap up this week's episode of 3 Wide. I thank you again for joining me and listening along. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to your podcast from. If you have subscribed, be sure to leave me a review. You can leave it on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, or you can find me at anchor.fm/3wide3. Hope everyone has a good week, and we will meet up same time next week and look over how these drivers overcame their new tracks.